Ready, boss?
I'm ready to go.
JD, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the trip down here. We have a special guest today, JD from Princeton University, strength and conditioning coach.
Yep.
I want to dive right in and just hear a little bit about your background, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. First, thanks for having me.
Of course.
This is an absolute blast. I've had a pleasure. It's been a pleasure talking to you already.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit about myself. Played sports all my life. Sports has been such a huge part of who I am and who I identify myself as. And I always knew I wanted to be part of sports my whole life. I just didn't know how. I started off. I played football, baseball. And luckily got into college and played college football. And then after that, after my sophomore year, had some thinking I had to do about where I really wanted to go with it. And, that was really when kind of sports kind of pivoted out of my life. And then I always knew I wanted to be part of it somehow. And so while I was studying in college, I went on and got my master's in exercise science, and I knew I wanted to do something. And the weight room was always a huge part for me. For those of you who can't see me at home, there's not much more of me. I'm only 5'6", so I needed something to help me out with being able to excel at my sports, and the weight room was always there. And that was one of those places that I love being in and I thrive in. So I started off doing physical therapy and realized really quickly that that's not where I want to be. And I want to try to not necessarily keep people out of here, but make sure that we're keeping our athletes as healthy as possible, but at the same time, not really making sure that people don't get hurt at the same time. And when I was in college, this was still an ever evolving process. It's not the sports performance world that it is now, was not the way that I was in college. You had your strength and conditioning coach was one of the position coaches that just happened to like to lift weights, type deal. So, with that, I actually talked with my advisor because I was having a bit of a mental health crisis, to tell you the truth, when I was a senior, because I realized that physical therapy wasn't what I wanted to do, and I didn't have a lot of time to do anything else. So he's like, well, you can make money doing what you love to do, and what you love to do is lifting weights. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, dude, go. And so I went to East Stroudsburg University and got my master's. And out of that master's program, you had to do a really extensive internship in the summer. And Princeton University was there, and I'm actually from the next town over. But funny side note, actually, my grandparents, when they immigrated here from Italy on my dad's side, they wound up in Princeton, New Jersey. And there's a very large part of our original town, small town in Italy called Petronello, that's in Princeton right now. And they have this sister city foundation that's there.
Really?
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy that this is all kind of full circle with me. I've had family members, distant cousins, friends help build the very gym that I work in the basement.
That's so cool.
It's wild. It's one of those, gratitude moments that you think of every time. I go in there and I'm like, wow, this is wild that we're here.
So it's James
DiVincenzi. Yeah. DiVincenzi. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Nice long one for you.
That's a long one. So my maiden name is Della Russo. So
yes.
Della Russo. We're going to crush this right now. 2 Italians.
Yeah, we got 2. This is going to be a fiery one for sure. But yeah, so after that, while I was there, we actually had a strength conditioning job open. And I asked very naively, not knowing how competitive college sports are and strength conditioning in college sports, if I could interview. And actually, my now co-head strength conditioning coach told me no at the time. I didn't have enough experience. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to work my butt off the entire time I'm here. And I did just that. They went through the entire hiring process, and I was a fast learner. I was there all day, every day. And I just loved being in that environment. And actually they offered the job to somebody else, and that person turned it down. And the staff came into the weight room, and my boss, Jason Gallucci, who's the director of performance, saw me training 3 different groups of athletes. And he's like, I'm not opening this up. I know he's a little green, but we're going to work with him,
Cool.
So 14 years later, here I am. I'm the associate head strength and conditioning coach there now.
Okay.
And in college strength conditioning, anybody who knows, you don't really have a lot of longevity. And if you do at different places, you're very fortunate. You're definitely the minority there. So the fact that I've been at a major Division I university in my hometown for 10 plus years now, like it's been a real blessing. Like
Sure.
that's really what I can say
Yeah.
it is. And it's, my dad always says, like, if you find something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I haven't been to work yet.
Yeah,
So it's
that's
one of those really cool
Yeah.
things.
And where'd you meet your wife?
I met my wife. Oh boy. So I met my wife. My wife was a special education teacher.
Okay.
And at a charter school that my aunt was a principal in.
Okay.
And, from a very, very young age, my dad was like, if, you're home in the summertime, you're working.
Okay.
So I needed a summer job. I was going into I was just going into my graduate year, and I didn't have anything to do. And my aunt called my dad up, and they needed people to help with the kids that had any kind of physical outbursts.
Okay.
Just 90, I think it's like 90+% of the special education field are women, and some of these kids get really strong. So they need help. So they trained me through that, and I was working on that. I was working with my wife, and she hated me. Oh my God. And
Stop.
I listen, I didn't do anything to help my cause. Like I was a prototypical, right out of college kid, I was coming there, not taking it seriously. Like my first day I had like a kid, like have like a massive thing. And I'm just like screaming, dude, what are you doing? And Chris was like, you can't call the kid dude. He doesn't know his own name. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. So long story short, she got me fired from that position. She asked me to get transferred out of that position. And after that, they moved me into another class with a bunch of kids that like I was actually really suited for. They were like more operational defiancy kids.
Yeah.
And so they had a male in there to work with them and a rough house with them, but also keep them on the straight and narrow, which was cool. It was definitely a huge perspective changer for me. But I'll never forget that my own wife got me fired from my first job. So there's that. But little of her knowing I was the nephew of the principal, so I wasn't going anywhere. So that's how we met. And then we kept in contact over the years. It was like always one of those things where like I'd come home or she'd be around and, somebody would be, either dating or, and then the stars aligned and it was
cool.
It was great. And we've been together for 10 years now.
Yeah.
So it's been really cool.
So that when you were in that classroom, you kind of pick up some skills that you use.
Yes.
You did, right?
Oh, 100%. And like, it's, even then when I was a little bit younger and not in the same mindset that I am now, like you pick up on where people are coming from, like, and it's a very interesting, that school was very interesting, especially with the ODD kids that I was working with. They're all in there and they're all have something else that they're dealing with right now. And for me to be able to read on different things, I'm like, all right, well, if he's having an episode, like we need to get him out of the room, whereas somebody else, like we need to get them something that they enjoy, like that kind of thing. And it was really great being able to help the teachers that were there. They were all amazing. They all took me in and cool. Really, it's really great hearing from still my wife keeps in contact with them to this day. They're some of her best friends. Yeah. So it's really cool. And then they all give her, they all rip her whenever they see her, like, can you believe you wound up with this guy? And they tell her, well, her dream boat has docked.
Yes,
so
yes.
That's it.
So people's stories obviously fascinate me. And like, I just like to hear like each stepping stone in someone's life to get them to where like you're in your dream job. Right. And so resilience, how do you teach that every day with your athletes?
Oh,
I mean, it's
one of those things where, it's you hear it in like movies and stuff like that, and it's cliche, but showing up is always the first step.
That's awesome.
Right. And not just the athletes showing up, because that's really hard to do, especially at Princeton, where you have some kids that don't like waking up at 6:30 in the morning. Yeah. You have kids that, they love their sport, but they love engineering or architecture even more, and you have these kinds of kids. Like our school is not a scholarship-based school. So they're there. It's a Division I commitment with a Division III attitude, right? Whereas if you quit your sport tomorrow, you're a Princeton University student still tomorrow. Or you're at a Power 5 school, you're out on the street afterwards. So it's with that, you've got to get your kids to love what they're doing. And the biggest way that I kind of teach resilience is I kind of try to frame things into perspective with them. I think that that's one big thing that I kind of, I don't want to say specialize in, but I have this weird thing in my head where like, I always tell them like, you get to do this, like, right? Like you always have to know that you get to do this. And waking up at 6, there's people on this earth right now, and a majority of them would kill to be able to wake up at 6:30 in the morning to lift weights versus what they got to do at 6:30 in the morning. You know, and it's one of those things, and it's, you know, it runs off, but if you ingrain that and you tell them that enough, and they know that, like, you talk about your why all the time, like that should be tattooed on my forehead, right? Like, is that you get to do this, because I tell people that all the time. And there's always somebody that has it harder than you. And after that piece, then when you show up, when something goes left, know that there's a bunch of people around you that care about you and will get you back onto the straight and narrow.
Love that. We were talking earlier, and I just love the piece about the relationships. So talk to me again about the interns that come and work underneath you. What's the first thing that you have them do? So with my interns, always our first project that our interns have is I tell them that by the end of the week, you have to find 7 different athletes, and you have to know their hometown. You have to know their family. You have to know how many brothers and sisters they have, what their major is. If they're a senior, you have to ask what their thesis is. And it's really with that, like, you know, somebody once said they don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. You know, and that's the first piece of it, is saying hello and shaking a hand. You know, like it's especially like at Princeton, there's so many times I'm walking down a hallway and people's eyes just dart down, you know, like, and I'll always say hi. Like I'm like, on my worst day, I'm still very friendly. So like, and that's just again, like, I'm so gracious and so happy to be where I am that, like, I think that feeds off and it gives life to people. But I tell our interns that you've got to see that, and they've got to see it, and you've got to do it your own way though too, because people aren't stupid, you know. Like, if you're putting on a show, people buy into that too. But once they know that you need to separate the person out before you include the athlete back in, that's where you're going to get somebody to run through a wall for you. You know, like, and you know, we talked about this. The best scientist in the world with a horrible buy-in will just get just that. You'll get the bare minimum out of that. You could be a horrible strength conditioning scientist, but if you can get people to know that you're there for them day in and day out, that's when you can move mountains. You know, and that's where we have our championship culture. Now, when you can marry both of them, then you've got then you've got lightning in a bottle there. You know, like, and that's the big part, and it's hard because it's you know, every day is different. But you know, going back to your question, that's what we do with our interns first. That's pretty awesome. And we actually don't start talking about strength and conditioning from a exercise science or any kind of scientific background until week 3. The first 3 weeks is all about different ways of building relationships and cultivating that buy-in that we look for. That's really cool. So culture, you talked a little bit about it. Like, I loved how you explained the culture at Princeton and how you guys do it right with the team of performance coaches that you have. Talk a little bit about that, because I just think Princeton's got it right. And I think if more universities had that angle, we would be better off as far as the mental health of these athletes. I mean, we have a really, really cool performance model, right? Where, you know, we have our director of performance, and then we have the strength conditioning staff, we have our nutrition staff, we have our mental performance team, we have our athletic training staff, and then we have our coaching staff. And through that umbrella, you know, that encompasses the entire sports performance umbrella. We're fortunate enough, we actually have 2 athletics only mental health professionals. So that puts us ahead of the game massively. Tremendous. I think. And Dr. Gross was, he wasn't only a one-man show. He was the primary, and then we had actually 4, and we still do, and they're 4 amazing people that work with our athletes, but they're like contracted out through counseling and psychological services. And then, but now we were able to actually just hire on this week another full-time person for that position. So, you know, phenomenal.
even though we do, like, even as an entire sports performance team, like we lose the numbers game because we've got 38 varsity sports. We have the third or fourth highest sport load in the country. So, we are doing that, but our something versus nothing is, in my opinion, so much better than a lot of places. And we have a lot of people reaching out saying, like, hey, how can we model what you're doing? A lot of it is to, like, our ability for our athletic director to really see, like, that this was something that we really do need to get in the forefront a little bit and get into our athletes' heads, the Ivy League, and just being an Ivy League student before you even fulfill that athlete part of the deal is so hard. And it really is, especially, like, you see them around exam time, and it's like Walking Dead around Princeton, So how do we work as a unit so that we can make sure that, when the tough times are tough, we're getting, if the athlete can give us 40%, we're getting 100% out of that 40%. And then when times are good, we can get 100% out of 100. But every one of those frameworks are different. And what's so great is that we're so interconnected, especially because we're all in one building. So that helps. But we're also so interconnected because even though Dr. Gross is just one person, he helps, we help him and he helps us be the arm of that. So because we're with our athletes more than he ever will be. So, he'll come up and he can come up and ask, nothing, obviously, that's like a sensitive issue or anything that's HIPAA or anything like that. But, if there's even an inkling that something's going on, I'll be like, hey, we got to get you in to talk with Dr. Gross. Like we need to,
That's great.
And we need you to, and a lot of times it's not because they're in crisis either, but, like, I think self-talk right now
so important
I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think younger athletes have it so backwards that it's so negative. I hear such negative self-talk, especially in the weight room, because that's kind of a traditional weight room environment, like, I'm not going to use the words that some of the athletes use, but you all get it, like, I did it, but, I pull them aside all the time and I'm like, hey, what do you need to do in this situation? They're like, all right, well, it's a 1 rep max back squat test. I'm like, okay. So what do you need to do there? And they'll break down everything that is. I was like, what part of you calling yourself that name is going to help you succeed in making that rep? You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of stuff. So it's helping them with self-talk. Visualization is huge. He's a huge meditation guy. So, like, and I think this is what's really cool about Princeton too. And he reached, like, we actually just have, one Monday a month, we have an all coaches meeting. And in this last all coaches meeting, we actually had CPS talk, and he talked about what it is for us and what we go through, when we work with our athletes, which I think is something that is often overlooked. We are always the rocks, right? But, you chip away enough, you're going to have some problems, and we have coaches that have had to deal with so much just this year in terms of their student athletes that we need help too. So they talked about, what we can do, who we can get in contact with, and also, like, pulling us together as groups and doing, like, coaches meditation and coaches visualization, which is really cool. I really hope they do, like, go into that. I know we're kind of, like, all over the place and busy, but I think especially the visualization work. Like, I'm not super big personally into meditation. My brain just goes, I mean, you can hear how fast I'm talking. It's going even faster up here, but visualization, I think, has really helped me as I've gotten older and knowing where I want to be, so then I can reverse engineer and work backwards, and when you're young, you don't see it, everything is the worst possible thing that can happen. Right. Like, and, like, the sky is falling when the littlest thing happens with these younger athletes. And so we could be like, hey, listen, visualize what you need to do. And then our CPS staff gives them the coping skills to be able to work with that, and then also trains us in helping them in the weight room with different ways of talking to our athletes. Which is, I think another really interesting point.
I mean, I think it's great that they're modeling the behavior that we want these athletes to do with you guys as a staff. Because if you guys are comfortable as a staff doing it together, then you're going to want to do that and take time for your athletes. I think that's really important. And you've made point about meditation. So I was not a meditation person. My mind goes as fast as yours. And usually I talk very fast, but I'm taking all of these communication courses about slowing down. But I started meditating, and it's very similar to visualization.
Mhm.
And when I turned the perspective into that, so when I meditate, you can actually meditate on the thoughts that you want to project in your life.
Okay.
So I don't just like meditate to stare into like deep space, or I don't meditate to my breathing, or I don't meditate to like a fountain playing.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I meditate to the thoughts that I want to repeat over and over in my head.
Okay.
And it takes me to this like energy space that my like unconscious becomes conscious.
Really?
I'm going to have to talk more about it with you, but
Yes,
like
please.
it changed for me, like
Huh.
completely. Because it was like, wow, that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? Like, and also what you go through, you probably have a lot coming at you.
Yeah.
You're in a top university, Ivy League, you're a dad,
Yeah.
you're probably a phenomenal husband as well. You have all these plates, and you've got to take that time to be able to, also manage each one in the moment and being present for each one of them. So
Yeah.
it's helped me be present. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Honestly, like that's so cool that you actually
Yeah.
just mentioned that, because I struggle with, like, especially now, like I being completely honest, like there's a lot of times where I've talked with my wife about this. Like the number one thing that, like, I don't buy into New Year's resolutions at all, but
Mhm.
like the number one thing I need to work on, and I want to work on right now, is being present.
Yeah.
And it's hard because you're pulled in 500 different ways and
Mhm.
directions, and then when you're home,
Mhm.
the stillness actually like kind of drives you nuts. Even though I got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old that are two of the most energetic kids in the world.
I don't know
they're
why.
amazing. Yeah, I don't know, right? And if you met my wife, she puts me to shame. So like,
no.
she's yeah. So it's one of those things. But like, I find myself, especially now with the information era and Instagram and
Mhm.
scrolling and all that stuff, like I've like actually like fully acknowledged, I was like, I have to stop this because I'm missing so much.
Yes.
And Google Photos is, I think, the coolest thing because it lets
Yeah.
you see backwards in time.
Yes.
But a lot of those times, I think in my head now, I'm like, I hope I wasn't on my phone when these things were happening,
Mhm.
like, because it's hard enough to remember now,
Mhm.
like, so I'm actively trying to, like, I tell my athletes now, like, if you need to get in contact with me, I was like, obviously, if it's an emergency, I have my ringer on, but if you're expecting a text message from me between the hours of 6 and 9 o'clock, you're not going to get anything until after 9, because that's my time to be home with my family.
That's awesome.
And that's like, we as coaches have such a hard time disconnecting,
Mhm.
because we want to be here for our
Yeah.
athletes all the time. It's a hard line, but like, the athlete also needs to know where you have to set healthy boundaries.
Yes.
Like,
Mhm.
and if there's one big thing that I did get wrong, and I can definitely admit that, especially like when my kids were really young,
Mhm.
especially over COVID, I think everybody's boundaries were completely broken because of
Yeah.
Zoom.
Yeah.
Like I remember getting hearing the Zoom thing at like 10:30 at night, and
Yeah.
like people wanting to hop on a call.
Yeah.
Like, so being able to reestablish those boundaries, and then again through introspection, like knowing that I need to be more present now, because
Mhm.
these times with my kids, my personal kids,
Mhm.
is so precious, and
Yeah.
they're at such a cool age right now. Like that 6 to 8 years
Mhm.
old is a magic time,
Mhm.
So like I need to make sure that I'm soaking in this as much as possible, because I'm gonna miss it.
Yes.
Like, and we have enough like, it's really cool. Like Princeton University is a family, athletics is very
Yes.
family oriented. We have so many people with small kids, middle kids, and older
Mhm.
kids that, like, I'm learning a curriculum on parenting
Mhm.
with other people too,
Yeah,
which is
that's cool. I like that.
like,
Mhm.
so
It's a cool perspective.
it's yeah, that perspective is
Mhm.
interesting, but like
Yeah.
that's definitely like being present. So like,
Yeah.
I would totally I would love to hear any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's cool. And I think it's important too for the athletes, because back when we played, it wasn't like that. You didn't meditate, you didn't visualize. You did. You did what your coach told you, and there was nothing else left. And so we became us. Like, I feel success from doing a million things in a day until I burnt myself out completely. And right. And so now it's like, that isn't success. Success truly is those moments with your children. Success for me is truly like actually honing in on the conversations that you have, and the impact you have, and the purpose.
Yeah.
So if we could teach these kids that, then it's like, maybe then when they get to be our age, they can slow down and raise kids. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, so I think that it's kind of like that whole continuum of all of us changing with the times changing, like
100%.
not just the kids. So
Yep.
I think it's cool, but I think Princeton definitely is getting it right. And it's obviously the leadership from the AD to, you know, especially Dr. Groves.
Yeah, Dr. Groves.
I mean,
And
that's phenomenal.
Again, I can't stop singing his praises because he's done so much, like, with not a lot of, like, I mean, like, again, we give him as much support as possible, but again, he's 1 to 1,500 athletes that we have. So it's definitely hard for him to, like, reach, and our athletes need help.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, you know, it does get, I don't want to say it gets alarming at times, but it does, you know, like it's with anything. And these kids are so hyper focused and so driven because they've been the best their entire lives.
Yeah.
And not just the best at sports, where, like, you'll see, like, a Division I athlete, like, especially a freshman, right? Big fish, small pond type deal, right? And then all of a sudden they get thrown into the college setting and they're against 6 other ones that are either them or better. Well, do that, but then also the most brilliant minds that you can find.
Yes.
And that's Ivy League athletes. And it's, you know, it's funny. I like to mess with my kids a little bit. Like, this is, you know, a little sick sense of humor with me, but, like, I'll go up to one of our guys during exam time and be like, so what are you going to get a C on? And they'll, like, look at me and be like, what? And I'm just like, I'm just messing with you. Like, you know, like, but it's like one of those things where, like, that's not an option.
Yeah.
You know, like these, and a lot of times school came very easily, just like sports comes very easily to us. School comes just as easily with them. Now they're at a place where, you know, you get a 15 on a test and that's a passing grade because this class is so hard, you know? So like it's, and you're going toe to toe with some of the best academic minds you'll find. Yeah. So, you know, and like I talked to my other colleagues at other Ivy League schools and they're fighting the same fight. You know, it's one of those things, especially around exam time.
So I'm assuming that there's a lot of teaching these kids how to fail and pick themselves up.
Yes.
I would assume that that's like a big lesson because they probably haven't failed much.
No.
Being at the top of the top, right?
Yes.
Academically, athletically, they're coming here. They haven't failed. So that's the lesson that we're teaching them. Yep. Yeah. Do you see that a lot?
You do. And usually it's very interesting because you see really successful athletes versus the athletes that are, you know, you have your bell-shaped curve, right?
Sure.
And the ones on the left, they're very adaptable to failure.
Yeah.
And they also know, like, how to give, you know, their volume of their mental and physical faculties to at what periods of time.
Okay.
Right? Versus you have your middle ones that are kind of floating all over the place. Those are actually, in my personal opinion, the most dangerous ones. Yeah. Because, like, once it goes left, it's, you know, they don't have either that's where really we need to step in and help. Yeah. And then you have ones on the bottom, which you've really got to really focus in on. And, like, some of that focus might be, hey, you might need to take some time away. Yeah. You know, like, and that's a big part is letting our athletes know that there's no shame in that, you know, and like, obviously we want them to be mentally tough. I hate that word though. Yeah. You know, because there's no set definition of what that is. It's different by everybody. Yes. You know, you don't know every athlete's story. You don't know how they were raised. You don't know what they're dealing with. And to give a blanket statement like that is doing them a disservice, right? So, how do we help them not model after, if you're on the one side, not completely model what's there, but maybe parrot it a little bit, you know, and see, like, all right, well, if they're doing that, and we do this really great thing. We talked about this in the car, where we have this thing called Student Athlete Wellness Leaders, our SALs. And what's really cool is, so they have this group at Princeton, the SAL group, and these are the athletes that really kind of have the pulse of the team. And so with that, they have meetings. I think it's once every month, or it might be bi-weekly. I'm not 100% sure on that. And they meet and they talk about the issues that they're facing right now at Princeton. So, you know, we have right now, especially too, it's not just in the sports world. It's, you know, we have a very, very progressively unified world in our small area of campus. And that has everybody in it. And with what's going on in the world right now, we've got athletes from all walks of life in all areas and everything. So it really helps having these groups of people to help get help to people that might be struggling, that don't want to say anything to their coaches. Because we can be there for them all the time, but they're going to get the most out of their peers. So the ability for us to be able to kind of tap that pulse a little bit is really, really helpful.
Do you all meet with them as a group?
We don't. So our director of performance meets with them.
Okay.
And then there's also a couple of other people from compliance, DEI.
Oh, cool.
They'll all meet and like kind of talk. And then they'll also talk about like, hey, here's what's offered at Princeton. You know, like one of the big things over COVID was our students didn't know that you could actually, when you were quarantined, you could get food delivered to you.
Oh, wow.
You know, so like our nutritionists, you know, meeting with and letting them know that, you know, like letting them know which areas of CPS to, you know, go to if they're like knowing what the actual avenues are if one of your teammates is in crisis. If your teammate's doing really well, like what do we like? Like, you know, like, because I think a lot of this right now, we're focusing on the negative, but like the positive is even more important because I think that's what makes us so successful.
Sure.
You know, like we have a very, very big winning culture at Princeton. And I think a lot of it is like, we know how to get our athletes help when they need it, but even more importantly, we know what to exploit and, you know, squeeze the juice as much as we possibly can out of success. And that only happens when we get everybody, you know, we win the locker room and we get everybody moving forward at the same time.
So there's two things. Oh my gosh. The first thing is like win the locker room, right? So you're the strength and conditioning coach. So you've been able to work with all these different teams. Would you say that there's definitely a correlation between the successful teams that have won the locker room and the culture?
100%.
Okay.
I don't think you have success without the locker room.
Okay.
You know, like, and I've been a part of some of the most successful teams at Princeton, and that was the one unifying bond that they've had there over different sports was you had 16 guys on men's basketball, you had 120 football players, you had 24 field hockey players, you had all these different athletes all moving forward. And even you're not going to get 100% buy-in, but what you're going to get is, you talk about resilience, you're going to get everybody moving forward. You know, that old, you know, you talk about like the Spartans, right? The most important part of the Spartan army was that they moved as a group. Yeah. One was never more important than the other. You're going to have your superstars and your most talented, and you're only going to win with those, right? But you're also going to have your practice people pushing them so that when time comes where they need to be resilient in the game, they go out and they win you the game. You know, like you never have success without having them moving forward unified. Yeah. And that's really where, you know, like, and I've been on the other side. I've been part of some really bad teams at Princeton, you know, and that was the opposite side. You know, you had locker room politicians, you had coaching staffs that were not understanding how to get to the athletes, you know, like, and every year you've got a whole new group of people coming in, you know, like, I work mainly with men's basketball, and I can tell you the freshman class that we have now is completely different than the sophomore class that we have. You know, the sophomore class is completely different than the juniors, and the senior class is different than them, but they all find ways to work together in harmony. Our water polo program, same deal. I work with like the water polo team here, so cool. And it's cool because like it's interesting because they're all a bunch of laid back California bros, and you've got this uptight, crazy Italian from New Jersey like working together. So it's kind of like an odd couple type deal. But like I love working with them because it shows you a way of doing things differently. Yes, you know, like same thing with coaches. Like I've had coaches like, you know, our football coach, Bob, has every second of every play of everything at practice tightly correlated and written down. We had this one coach who's one of the most winning coaches in college swimming. His name is Rob Orr. That guy didn't know what he was doing until he walked on deck that day. Oh, wow. You know, like, and so like to be able to see how these two different things work, but how ultimately the only reason why they have the success bubble that they have is because they know how to relate to their group of athlete. You know, like with Rob and our swimming guys, like I learned a really hard lesson my first year of strength conditioning because one of my first teams that I had was men's squash. And so I was assisting with football, and I would go from football to squash, and I would go and be football strength coach JD to the squash team. And like, there's a lot of sports where strength conditioning isn't directly in the DNA, you know, like, and a lot of these teams, the first time they're doing organized strength conditioning is when they walk into my room for the first time. Yeah. And I remember, and there was an amazing, like he was he's a very, very highly winning coach. He's recent, or not recently deceased, but he's passed away. Bob Callahan was one of the most amazing people that I've ever met. And Bob came up to me one day. He's like, hey, he had a real soft voice. He's like, hey, JD, I think you got to change the way that you're talking to the guys. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, you're scaring them. And I was like, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're probably, like they're probably not used to this like crazy. Like I used to have a shaved head too, so you had this like, crazy dude like coming down, and the second I changed, like the weight room changed, you know? So like you see that, like again, you win the locker room, right? Like, and my coaching style now is completely different. I have 5 main teams. Every one of them gets a different version of me. They get the number one thing they get from me is accountability. That's the backbone. Like I'm going to hold you accountable. You have to do my basic rules and we'll be fine. But after that, I'm going to talk to not only the team differently, but individuals on that team differently too.
Yes.
And that's a really important part is especially too. And it's hard, like Bob's got to do it with 120 football players. Mitch has to do it with 16 men's basketball players, so like you have that, but what's cool is your ability to use your assistant coaches as arms and your strength staff, like this doesn't happen at Princeton, but like you'll hear a lot of people have heard like when you get to college sports, you're with your strength coach more than you're with your regular coach. We don't have that because we don't have summer school. So 95% of our athletes go home instead of here in the summertime. But anywhere else, you're only with your strength staff due to NCAA regulations. Yeah. But we're still like the pulse that we have with our athletes. And what's been really great. And so like, I want to say from like 2009 to like 2015, we were very successful. But then right around the 2015 time, and I attribute a lot to this because we hired more strength staff on. So I used to have 8 teams. And now I only have 5. And now I'm able to travel with my teams more.
Oh, cool.
And I tell you what, like when I was able to now travel with my teams, that's where the buy-in, bang, because now we're hanging out, we're having dinner, and we're watching sports, or we're watching something, we're watching a movie on the bus, and we're able to. That's like, especially like athletic medicine, like they can even build that even faster because it's all one-on-one. I get my one-on-one time now when I'm traveling with my team.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, that's cool. I can imagine that being different. Yeah. We traveled with our strength and conditioning coach and more our athletic trainer, I would say. Definitely. Yeah. That's more common. Like we're actually not seen as like mandatory staff on traveling things. Like this is like, it's not voluntary, but like at the same time, like if I can't travel with stuff and this is another part about Princeton that's so great is that we are so family oriented that like, if I have family stuff come up, Mitch is like, dude, don't come. Like, I don't need you at this game, so it's one of those things where like, I like to think that what I do when I'm there really helps, but at the same time, it's not like athletic medicine where if an athlete were to get hurt, they need medical attention. So like we all understand that. So I'm like, all right, well, how am I going to earn my paycheck then? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to build as many relationships with these athletes as possible. And you can't do that in a weight room. I only get 45 minutes with them, so I can get surface level stuff, but afterwards I can, when we're just hanging out and like BSing in the lunchroom or something like that, we get to, that's where really, the rubber hits the road when it comes to building a relationship. So you definitely have a growth mentality, obviously, right? So tell me a little bit about like, are you a podcast guy? What's your favorite book? Kind of like, where do you just keep feeding?
I'm like, I'm a sponge when it comes to podcasts, and it's like I think I'm full with as many as I have. I love listening to anything from like, and I listen to NPR. I listen to like President's Daily Brief and things like that. So like, I at least know a little bit of what's going on in the world. I like entertainment podcasts. I'll listen to Joe Rogan or Two Bears, One Cave with Tom Segura, Bert Kreischer, like because I like to think I'm a funny guy and I love to laugh. So when it comes to like mindset, I love anything Simon Sinek does. I think he's really good. I love reading and getting perspective from people who've served. So Tim Kennedy is one of my favorite, and listening to him and hearing any people, Jocko or any of those types of things, typical strength coach, I guess you could say, but at the same time, like the message is what the message is, and it really helps. I can tell you the most the best team building exercise we ever did was we took the basketball team to Fort Dix.
Okay.
And they did like military, like I was really afraid because I thought we were just going to do like beat the crap out of them, like military style. We didn't do that. We sat down in a room and listened to servicemen and women who were field medics, field engineers, mechanics, and how they work as a team there to make sure that the mission is done well and with no loss of life.
Okay.
And that was that in my opinion, like it was the coolest thing in the world. Like it blew my mind. But I love hearing how like our military does that, and you know, there's a lot of merit to that. Like so that's I love listening to that. I'm not really a huge reader. Just like, again, my mind just doesn't stay still. So I love listening to audiobooks though. So Malcolm Gladwell, a lot of those, you know, self-help books. I like to listen and read about finance as well too. I tell my interns all the time, you know, it's not about the money you make, it's about the money you keep. So especially in our field where, you know, our field does not start off making a lot of money. So, you know, if you don't want to burn yourself out, you've got to make sure that the things that you can control, you can control.
Yeah. That's great advice.
So yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, our time is up, but I do want to ask one thing from you. Sure. Define resilience.
Resilience is the ability to stay focused when adversity hits you in any different way. And then when time comes to ask for help, you're able to do it.
Excellent. JD, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.